Hey everybody, it's Brian Burns. Welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Today we've got a great story about Airbnb and how they're trying to get into the B2B space. There's too many B's there, Brian. Cut it out. You're driving me crazy. I got DJ Francis on today, and he did an engagement with them. And we're going to talk about how they use content. And I'm pushing back on them a little hard here because I wanted to really understand how it works. But I think this is a great case study of how you can use content to reach a new market, no matter how great your brand recognition is. Getting into a new segment can be really difficult. Before we get into the interview, I want to make sure you're checking out b2brevenue.com. I've got a couple of courses in there to help both marketing and sales start conversations and get the meeting. I also have my calendar link there. So if you'd like a company training for more than one person and have it customized for you, schedule a time. We'll talk it through, see if it's a match for you. Also, I have my free ebook there as well. I also want to make sure you're checking out my partners' blog posts, pipedrive.com and nudge.ai. Nudge.ai is doing a great job with interviewing the C-suite to understand how they make buying decisions. These are critical insights for anybody who's in sales or marketing today to understand how the C-suite learns about new products. And guess what? It's different than what we thought. It's not cold calling. It's not cold emailing. A lot of networking in there. But that's what I teach in my course, and I show you how to do it in a systematic, humanistic way that's insanely effective. I'm going to start putting sound bites from the case studies into the podcast so you can kind of get a customer testimonial from that. Also, I want to make sure you're checking out covideo.com. That's what I use for my video emails. Video, this is the year. I'm telling you, 2018 is going to go down in history as a year of video. It's everywhere. It's on all of social media, and it's insanely effective. I'm talking about 10 to 100 times more effective than text. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'll show you what I'm doing, and I'm getting enormous traction you just can't buy. At almost any price. So check that out as well. Connect up with me on LinkedIn. I really appreciate the people who follow the podcast page. It's a company page. Basically search for B2B Revenue. It'll come up. Just follow it. I share funny videos every day and updates on the podcast. Let's get into the interview, and at the end, I'll sum it up for everybody. Thanks for listening. Hey, DJ, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I'm DJ Francis. I run Hub and Spoke Marketing out of beautiful Boulder, Colorado. We're an independent marketing consultancy with a specialty in B2B content marketing.
How'd you get interested in this?
I actually got my master's in contemporary literature. The job I have today didn't exist when I was in school. So, I kind of found my way just through tenacity and enjoyment. Speaking to large groups of people is something that I enjoy. And so marketing was kind of a natural fit.
And what made you decide to go out on your own?
I actually started speaking with a network called Communo. They're a vetted professional network based out of Calgary, and I'm now a paying member of that group. And they kind of gave me the fortitude to go out on my own last year because it's a network where you can give and get work. I felt like I could, it was enough of a similarity to an agency model that I could kind of work my way in, and it's proven successful. I've been out on my own for almost 2 years now.
And what is your focus now? What's your expertise?
So it's B2B content marketing, which tends to occupy three different kind of areas. First is the strategy. So what are we even trying to get out of this? What does the brand want to communicate? How are we internally aligned? And then the content execution. So I do everything from the creative execution myself to managing teams of writers or freelancers. And then thirdly, there's the technical implementation. So what is the software that's going to kind of undergird all of this? I am especially familiar with things like HubSpot and Marketo. Other marketing automation or CRM platforms often, kind of come into the mix because in order to support the content that I'm recommending or putting out there, we need to have that platform up to kind of support that publishing process.
And is there a particular case study you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, I'm here today to talk a little bit about my work with Airbnb for Work. So I worked with them over almost all of 2017, and we were able to develop a demand generation content hub, which you can find at airbnbforwork.com. And so, what I'd like to discuss today is just kind of how we came up with that content hub, some of the benefits of it. There's a pretty robust lead scoring program running underneath it. So I can speak about all of those topics and more.
Yeah, well, take us through the journey of what were they trying to accomplish? What, your 3-step process. I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah. Sure. So, I really have to compliment Airbnb for Work's leadership here. They really had a vision for what this business could be. So when I came in at the beginning of 2017, Airbnb for Work had already been around for a couple years, actually. Most folks don't know this, but over 10% of Airbnb's bookings were already for work. People were actually using the platform already for this. And so they kind of saw this coming and were getting their ducks in a row. When I started talking to them, they realized that they had a real need to help travel managers at all sizes of companies to kind of use Airbnb, because obviously the sharing economy, things like Uber, Lyft, these are all new to folks. And so what they realized was that there wasn't a good platform in the market that kind of helped these travel managers bridge the gap between here's what I do already with traditional accommodations, and then here's how I can kind of use Airbnb within my work and confidently send my people out into the world.
And how did you build up a content strategy to kind of solve that? Because that seems like a big thing to
It was. It involved it was I wasn't the only one involved. So there was a strong Airbnb internal team. There was also a company called Annuitas, which is a demand generation agency out of Atlanta. Great folks, very talented. And so we did a lot of internal alignment. There at the time I came in, there was not a marketing automation platform within the building, even on the B2C side, and their Salesforce setup was, well, I'll say, suboptimal. And so, there were a lot of there were both the business priorities to kind of get in a row, explain to the C-suite why this was important and how it would impact the funnel. But there were also foundational elements that were missing as well. The tech stack had some holes in it, and we really had to think about the whole lead process, because that funnel was not as well defined on the B2B side by any means.
And so what were your recommendations?
So we recommended that they create this content hub. We created over 20 pieces of content with the sole purpose of explaining the value to travel managers of how they can be better travel managers, kind of top of the funnel. And then as they kind of went down the funnel and got more interested, we did start to include some references to Airbnb for Work. So and I'll give you an example here. So for instance, at the top of the funnel, we have content like new to managing travel, 5 tips to help you get started, or 6 steps to help you start a company travel policy. So we created these top of the funnel pieces of content that were just solely designed to get people into the funnel, to help them understand that we were a resource for this kind of information. And those types of articles didn't mention Airbnb whatsoever. This was just to sort of help that new travel manager. I mean, imagine if you're someone, you're an executive assistant at a mid-sized company. Your boss doesn't want to spend as much money on hotels. What do you do? There's no real blueprint for that. So we started to give people that blueprint. As they got lower into the funnel, though, we did start to bring up the product. So lower in the funnel, you'll see articles like how to get leadership buy-in to launch Airbnb for Work, or measuring the impact of partnering with Airbnb for Work. So, as we didn't hit people over the head with the product stuff at the very beginning, obviously we wanted to kind of warm them up and, gain some credibility and trust. But then as they get into it, there were serious business impacts. Businesses were saving 40+% just on cost alone for Airbnbs versus hotels. And so we knew that we had a really powerful story to tell, but we also knew that we had to establish that kind of top of the funnel credibility and trust first.
And how did people find out about these? Did you advertise and promote this content? Because I would think it would take a while for it to become visible or rank.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I think that's something that we did a little bit kind of at the very beginning, based on some of the business priorities. They kind of had more of a soft launch where we put it out there. We did a lot of IP warming and kind of prepared for all this. But you're right, we didn't come out of the gate with kind of a big bang. So for content, it's right. We wanted to kind of get that in the market. So the content site Airbnb for Work actually launched in, I believe it was April of 2018. And so they were fairly quiet about it in Q2. They started to do a little bit more in Q3. And I recently just sent along a press release from August that kind of outlined some of the results from that effort. And I'm pleased to say that they were actually very impactful to the business. So if anyone has doubts about content marketing's impact on the bottom line, this is a case study to show you how it works.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it does work when people are looking and, when people are in market. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to think through. What's that?
How do we get that initial sort of interest there?
Well, when you think of Airbnb and I think of business, I think of it as, if you're going away with your family and you want a nice house versus a hotel room, clearly, great, you can find a great place. But if I'm traveling to X city for 2 nights, do I really want to figure all that out?
Right. And that's a fair point. I should mention that as I was working for them, I'm based in Boulder, and they're obviously not here. They're in San Francisco. So I traveled to San Francisco 32 out of 37 weeks last year and stayed at over 30 Airbnbs around within a mile of their office. So I can tell you that, there are some, it's a non-traditional route, right? You do have to, work things out with a host, and it does take a touch of extra effort on the front end. I think what people find, though, is that the amenities and the comfort so far exceed what they would get in just a standard hotel. And we had proof that this was actually the case. There were research reports that people get more and more depressed the longer they stay in a hotel that's just completely anonymous. And you really don't have that with Airbnb. There are actually, it's really nice to kind of come home after a long day and chat with the host and, maybe sit out in the garden and have a drink. Like, these are non-traditional, but that doesn't necessarily mean more hassle. It could mean actually a better experience.
Yeah, I can get that. But also, you're also trying to go after a completely different market, right?
That's true. And, that market is changing, though. So one of the things that I didn't realize before I started working with Airbnb is that by 2025, most of the workforce will be millennial. And that workforce is traveling. These are younger folks. They're being sent around the country all the time. So millennials are definitely changing the way that we travel. I think, I don't fall into that category. I'm a little older than that. And folks who are like me and Gen X or older are coming around to it a little bit slower. I think we have a little bit more of a learning curve, but there's a reason that, I saw a figure that 60% of Airbnb for Work trips in the last year included more than one guest. So that means folks are traveling with their families. They're kind of doing what you're doing in the sense that, yes, I might be going for work Thursday and Friday, but I'm going to stay over with the family on Saturday and Sunday, and we're going to have, a nice trip together. And there's proof for that too. 30% of Airbnb for Work bookings in the last year have included at least one weekend night, 3 in 10. So that's a pretty significant figure. And it just shows that people are changing the way that they travel for work. And they're kind of, the word we used internally was bleisure. I really hate that word, but,
like glamping. Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible, but there is some truth to it. So, people are changing the way.
Yeah, I definitely get that. So, but also I would think from your role that, that millennial group gets it. They do have a family. They do want an experience. They're not the ones that are going to, at 5:30 head to the airport to get the last flight home. Right. They're going to stay the weekend. I totally get that. But they're also the ones that don't need or want or probably look for like an Airbnb blog, right?
Well, I don't know. I think sometimes they do, and sometimes other people find it for them.
Yeah.
In a lot of these cases, 40% of Airbnb for work bookings are through enterprise companies. So this is a situation where someone else may be making the booking for you.
Yeah.
So they may not even have total autonomy within that kind of decision making. So actually what we found are there are two kind of scenarios. First, there's that travel manager who might be sort of younger, who's determining travel for, between one and who knows how many people. And sometimes they come across it. Other times, though, you have folks who use Airbnb for work in their everyday life, and they will be the ones who send these articles to their travel managers who are like, hey, if Facebook and Columbia Sportswear and Twitter are doing this, is there any reason that we can't? And so, the travel managers are kind of getting it from both sides. They're trying to be more efficient. They might be searching online for these, and finding these articles that talk about cost savings and all this sort of stuff. But they're also having those internal influencers come to them and say, look, if I can book 2 nights on my phone while I'm in between meetings, why are we having such an issue, booking me for work? It's I think as time goes by, you're seeing that the friction decrease. Airbnb for work in just the last year integrated with Concur, the expense reporting software. So you're seeing all of those little friction pieces are kind of falling away as the platform develops.
And how about on the promotion side of the content? Because if people aren't aware of it yet, you want them to get aware of it. They're probably not Googling, right, for the 5 things about this or that. Where do you put the content? Do you put it on Instagram? Do you put it on Facebook, LinkedIn, everywhere?
It's a good question. So we've been very particular about the subject matter that we put out to different channels. So you're right. There are a lot of Airbnb digital properties that they can and do use. So you'll see Airbnb for work on the company blog. You'll see them on social media. They do all those sorts of things. I believe they did get into a little bit of paid advertising around the content. I can't speak to that entirely. My tenure was kind of over at that point, but I believe I am seeing more people in the market, put paid ads behind content, because that's, like you were saying, that's the way that you get kind of people in the top of the funnel, either through organic and coming up in those searches, or if need be, kind of, coming up on the side there.
Yeah, I would think you'd have to, because I don't know, how many people for work would be like, hey, I want to see what Airbnb's blog looks like.
Yeah. So I think paid does have to play into that. We also included some pretty neat behavioral hooks, though, as we were going along. So, for instance, if someone snags that first article, we follow up with a fulfillment email. We have on-screen recommendations that are highly, highly tuned to who that person might be and where they are within the funnel. So our next recommended articles tend to get a lot of reads just because they're very, very relevant to that person. So there are ways that you can kind of add those hooks in and keep people kind of going. Getting them in the top of the funnel does present a challenge, and I think paid is a smart element in that. But there are also elements to, once you get them in there, to deepen and nurture that relationship too, of course.
And is there much of kind of that classic email marketing on the B2C side, or do they stay away from that?
The B2B and B2C sides were a little bit separate at the time. I think Airbnb is they're very cautious over user data, which I appreciate, right? I mean, they prize privacy and confidentiality, above all. And so I think that they hadn't internally kind of figured out how this different business unit was going to work within that system. But now I'm sure they have it all cleared up. I mean, we were finalizing funnels and all those sorts of things. So I'm fairly certain that with all the bright minds in those buildings that they figured out a way to make that profitable for the B2C side too.
So as far as your kind of definition of the personas, did you go through that exercise, or was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about that.
It was really interesting. So we were seeing, anytime you dive into personas, first you want to get kind of the high level understanding of that audience, but then as you dig down, it's really the differences that make up, how you're going to attract people. And so what we saw is there were really two types of travel managers. There were highly managed, where they were in, maybe they come from a background of managed travel, corporate programs, all that sort of good stuff, where they're managing travel for lots and lots of people. And that's one kind of scenario. And then you have another scenario for mid-sized to smaller companies, usually where you have an executive assistant, someone who hasn't been trained in travel whatsoever, who's kind of delegated this task, right? The CEO comes down and says, all right, you're doing travel now, and you got to run with it. So those are two very different scenarios, right? And the background and the kind of the way that you approach them, you need to be sensitive to that. And so we do have, we had different tracks of, how people would be delivered content. It was fairly sophisticated, I think. I've never seen anything that was more sophisticated myself, just in terms of how you kind of lead a person through. It's like Hansel and Gretel through the woods, right? We're just leaving breadcrumbs, and people are starting to follow. And so, if the content is good and if it's valuable, and if you do all the best practices, you can get some folks to get them interested.
Yeah, because I got to think that those people, given that they're delegated and it's a thankless job, right? Because,
it is.
Because anything goes wrong, it's their fault, right? Like they have control over the weather or the flight schedules, right? and then you look at Airbnb, where unless the person making the request has already bought into the concept and loves it,
right?
I got to see that as a huge risk. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can imagine, it's kind of apparent, right? When you just imagine the scenario in your mind, there's a generational split there. Yeah. So the executive assistant is never the same generation as the boss, and they're kind of going to them and saying, well, look, this isn't actually that crazy. I've done this, half a dozen times. What you tend to see, and this is no surprise to anyone who's been in marketing, but you have those early adopters. So a lot of times, for the small and mid-sized companies, we were seeing the CEO delegate the task and saying, like, hey, I don't want to stay in a Hyatt, pick anything. We're going crazy. We just need to move here. So, we saw that. And then as I was there, we were kind of switching over and getting past those early adopters and more into, a little bit more of the routine folks. And so that was a challenge to kind of get over that hump and to keep them interested. We did a lot of research into what those travel managers would be searching for, the types of keywords that they would be interested in. So, we did our best to kind of, ensure success at the back end just by kind of knowing those personas really well and understanding how they behave.
And what did resonate with them? I'm sure that it's like anything. It's like there's one or two pieces that get like 80% of the traffic.
The ones that I was, I had a few that were really surprising to me, and they were the more technical kind. So as a content guy, I love words, but I'm always a little concerned about long form content, or, are you going to lose these people? And what we found was not the case at all. They would take these, and I think the reason is because the challenges that they're trying to solve for are complex in and of themselves. So things like, hey, you're creating your company's first travel policy. Here's what a template could look like for that. That amazingly simple kind of routine article would get lots and lots of views. And it didn't matter how long it was. People were just absorbing it and consuming that content because it was actually valuable to them. They had to put together a travel policy because they're probably pulling out their hair, because they don't have one in place, right? And so they saw it as, gosh, I'm going to put this in place so it can protect me and how I work. And then, if it happens to get Airbnb, and great, but this is more about adding value to that travel manager and helping them do their job better, really.
Yeah, I can see that really work, and that was brilliant.
Yeah.
How long was that? How big of a piece?
I want to say it was over 1,000 words. And I kind of put in my head as a 500-word cutoff, like, all right, beyond this, we should kind of take care. And I did have reservations, to be honest, but I'm glad I was proven wrong that it was, really valuable and that people would, kind of read all the way to the end. Yeah. I'm always happy to be proven wrong about that kind of stuff.
And how about the short form stuff? Was there a particular, 5 of this or 5 of that worked really well?
Nothing that really stood out, but I think the volume of readership, just the we would see not the normal drop off or bounce rate. We were seeing people consume, multiple articles at a sitting. So we had indications fairly early on that this content was valuable and would resonate with people. But to the company's credit, they're continuing to create content as well. So they have content in the pipeline that's not even launched yet that is based on kind of that first couple months soft launch look at it. So Airbnb, I have to say, is a fantastic company. They're very innovative, and they are always watching that next step. What should we be working on? And you wouldn't believe the stuff they have in the pipeline. It's really incredible.
Cool. And where do you see kind of this content space going? Because it's gotten really crowded. It's very complex. Everyone's doing it. Mm-hmm. And, I think everyone's kind of taking the quantity over the quality.
Well, and that's how you separate yourself. Like I said at the very beginning, you can create content all day. The internet doesn't need more content. What we need is more content that's actually going to move units and educate and get people buying. I don't create content as a creative exercise. It is a way to elicit a behavior and move someone down a funnel. And they tend to appreciate it because, I work with companies that actually have good products and they do good things in the world. So I don't see marketing as a force for bad. I see it as, we are getting out there, we're educating folks, and we really did simplify a lot of these folks' lives. They've been dealing with outdated platforms trying to manage this travel or trying to deal natively with each particular hotel. It is a headache beyond belief. And so the fact that we could go in and say, hey, not only are you going to save money, but you're going to save a bunch of time and hassle too. I mean, that's a pretty nice sales pitch. I don't mind going in. I can give that pitch all day.
And who's your ideal customer profile for your business?
For my business, I enjoy working with folks who have a long sales cycle and sometimes complex products. So that's why I've dealt a lot in software. I mean, Airbnb for work is effectively a software platform. They're not a travel company. Their product is a piece of software. So I tend to work with folks like that, SecureWorks, Confirmation.com, these companies that have a great product that performs well, but they need to explain something very complex to folks. I have been very successful in my career at breaking down the complex and making things a little bit easier for them to move along. I think also something that differentiates me is I'm not afraid to buddy up to the sales guys. I see sales and marketing as a partnership that has to work together. Sometimes it's very contentious, but I can't succeed as a marketer unless sales is out there closing. So I consider sales my kind of my number one audience, and if it's not working for them, it's not going to work for me. So those are kind of two ways that I've differentiated myself. You're right. There are a lot of content folks out there, and you can create content until you're blue in the face. But in order to create the right content that actually creates value for your user, it's a touch more difficult.
Yeah, and I think it is those useful things, whether they're little tools or where you're doing someone's job for them, coming up with a policy framework. Mm-hmm. Saving them enormous amounts of time, trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And these are folks who were spending. This isn't a pack of gum I'm buying. I might be spending millions on software platforms that are going to impact my company for years and years to come. So I enjoy those kind of high stakes. Marketing opportunities where you can actually dive in and show people the value that's there. I love that kind of stuff. And I've been lucky enough to work with all these great companies. And so we have lots of success stories coming out of it. And there's nothing more gratifying to a content guy than to hear like, wow, this piece of random content that I found on the internet or was presented to me in a paid ad actually changed the way that I work. That's very validating to what I do.
Great. And where do people go to learn about you, your company, and your work?
They can reach me at djfrancis.com. They can also find my work at hubspoke.marketing. And I'm more than happy to talk to folks. I really appreciate you taking the time today, Brian. I enjoy your series and think it's a great help to folks too.
Hey, DJ's a fun guy, and it's a great story, a great use case and example, and how you get a big company to make a little change to get into a new market space and expand their revenue base. Hey, an update on the courses. The prices are going up September 1st, so if your team was interested, point them towards B2B b2brevenue.com under training, and the course offerings are there. I got 2 free courses, one on LinkedIn profiles. I show you how to get around that company icon not populating. That's a common problem, as well as what your picture should look like, your headline, common mistakes that people make in their profiles, all free. And the other one is the nudge.ai course. It's $250, but you get it free with the coupon code NUDGE. And just plug that in. I'll show you how I use AI to address my total addressable market space and have an email sent to me every morning that I then highlight, trim down, and send to a VA, virtual assistant, who then does my prospecting for me. Insanely effective. Also, make sure you're connecting up with me on LinkedIn. You can kind of see how I'm using video on LinkedIn and social to connect and engage with the audience, you folks, as well as Co-Video. Check out their company page to see how they're using video in email and on social to connect. It is the way to get your emails to be opened and engaged with. People are sick of the pitches. They're sick of the text, sick of the me. We've got to give and add value to people. And value is in the eyes of the recipient, not the sender. So I really appreciate everybody listening. Also, check out Discover.org. They did a great announcement last week, and they've got a series of webinars that you really want to check out at discoverorg.com. They did a thing with Bombora to find in-market data about exactly who's in market for your product based off of their browsing history and what they're reading online. It'll show you the companies that are in market right now for exactly what you do. So check it out at discoverorg.com. Tell them you heard it at Brian Burns' podcast, the B2B Revenue Leadership Show. I've got some great episodes coming up. We're going to finish up the year really strong. A lot of great changes. If you're looking to add capability to your CRM as far as what's really going on, instead of number of calls, number of emails, it really can be gamed. If you haven't noticed, as long as people have been counting, like, why do people bother? Everyone just marks it down or plays the game. Let's focus on the relationships between the two companies. Let's focus on the quality of the calls that we're having, not the quantity. The quantity doesn't really matter. We don't get paid on that. We only get paid on what closes. So let's focus on what closes and work on the things that make them close. That's what I teach in my courses. That's what I'm working with all my partners on. It's all about quality. The quantity is just a delusion, a distraction. It's something to keep everybody busy instead of effective. Have you checked out Rainmaker Force yet? I partnered up with Rainmaker Force because they've got this new capability of surveying your customers. It's a lot like Net Promoter Score, but imagine having a Net Promoter Score throughout the whole sales process. So instead of just seeing how happy a customer is, let's, during the sales process, be able to have the customer give a honest, truthful answer to something that's super simple and they're incentivized to do, so that we get their involvement in our forecasting and prediction possibilities, so that you get insight from your customer, the people who are really doing something. The salespeople have happy ears. They cannot not have happy ears. Marketers have, hey, we all got happy ears. What we need is what the customer really is going to do, and they're going to tell us, not face-to-face, because no one likes to deliver bad news. So check it out, rainmakerforce.com. Tell them you heard about us on the B2B Revenue Show. I think that they're onto something big there. It connects automatically with your CRM, and it's super simple to use. So check it out. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. And are we connected? Or are you going to be a total stranger out there? I'm on LinkedIn, Brian G. Burns. We'll see you there.